again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know.
During the 1920s and 1930s, there were many groundbreaking discoveries surrounding the emerging field of particle and nuclear physics across the United States and Europe. Prior to American involvement in World War II, famed physicists and refugees from Nazi Germany, Leo Szilard and Albert Einstein, wrote a series of letters expressing the danger posed in the potential for Germany to develop a weapon that utilizes nuclear fission. Shortly after the United States entered World War II on the side of the Allies, President FDR authorized a secret project to develop and create fission-based weapons. This so-called Manhattan Project involved thousands of scientists at dozens of sites across the country. Most work and research was conducted at secret facilities in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Los Alamos, New Mexico. By 1945, project scientists had perfected the uranium purification process and had constructed the world's first uranium and plutonium bombs. The conclusion of the Manhattan Project did not come in time to use the weapons against Germany, their original intended target. However, by the summer of 1945, Japan still refused to surrender. On July 16, 1945, the first atomic bomb was detonated in the desert near Alamogordo, New Mexico. The Trinity bomb test had a yield of 21 kilotons, which is equivalent to 21,000 pounds of TNT. If an identical bomb were dropped over Chapel Hill, nearly 60,000 casualties would result, with about 30,000 killed and about 30,000 wounded. On July 26, 1945, at the Potsdam Conference, Japan was given a vague threat of prompt and utter destruction. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced its unconditional surrender following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The two cities were chosen due to their relative intactness, as larger cities such as Tokyo and Osaka had already been devastated by extensive conventional bombing raids. The city of Hiroshima was destroyed by the Little Boy bomb, which was dropped on August 6, 1945. The 13-kiloton device is estimated to have led to 250,000 deaths, both directly and through the bomb's indirect effects, such as radiation exposure, cancer, and etc. 3 days later, Nagasaki was leveled by the Fat Man plutonium bomb. This 21-kiloton device led to nearly 80,000 deaths by the end of 1945.
As soon as World War II ended, the Cold War began. Initially, only the United States had atomic weapons. However, the USSR was developing them as well. During the Manhattan Project, the USSR had many spies in the United States that shared top-secret nuclear information. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg are among the most high-profile spies and were executed for treason in 1953. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first nuclear device. Also in 1949, NATO was founded. This was the first peacetime alliance that the United States had been a part of. Its doctrine was based on collective defense, where all members would work to defend a member nation if attacked by a hostile nation. Britain and France, among other prominent NATO member nations, would develop and test their own nuclear weapons by 1952 and 1960 respectively. In April 1951, President Truman relieved General MacArthur of his role as commander of the UN intervention forces in Korea. Among the main reasons was MacArthur's insistence in using nuclear weapons against the Chinese and North Koreans. On November 1, 1952, the U.S. tested Ivy Mike, the first hydrogen bomb in the Pacific Ocean. Soon afterwards, the USSR develops a hydrogen bomb. Allegedly, France asked the United States to use several tactical nuclear weapons to break the siege of French forces at Dien Bien Phu in April of 1954. CEDAW is formed in September 1954 to contain communism in Southeast Asia. The Warsaw Pact would be signed in 1955 by the USSR and various other Eastern Bloc nations as a counterweight to NATO. Under the Eisenhower administration, traditional armed forces were reduced in favor of increased using of nuclear weapons. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles originated the term brinkmanship in a 1956 Life magazine interview. Throughout the late 1950s, both the US and USSR increased their stockpiles of nuclear warheads. Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever constructed, is tested in the Soviet Union in October of 1961. For 13 long days in October 1962, the US and the USSR were engaged in a standoff surrounding the Soviet deployment of a short and medium-range nuclear missiles in Cuba. This incident, infamously known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, would be the closest public occasion where the two superpowers went to all-out nuclear war. American forces entered DEFCON 2 for the first time, meaning nuclear war was almost imminent. The Partial Test Ban Treaty is ratified in 1963, forbidding all atmospheric and oceanic nuclear tests. In 1968, American forces contemplated using tactical nuclear weapons to break the siege of Khe Sanh during the Vietnam War. For the next 2 decades, both the US and USSR built their stockpiles. However, efforts were made to prevent any nuclear confrontation. From 1969 to 1976, tensions were relaxed. This period of the Cold War became known as détente. During détente, the US and USSR signed the SALT I Treaty in 1972 and negotiated but did not ratify SALT II in 1979. Détente abruptly ended when the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan renewed tensions in 1979. In the 1980s, both saw escalation of tensions, notably with the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars program, in 1983. In response, the Soviet Union massively increased its stockpile of warheads. Also in the 1980s, the first START, or Strategic Arms Reduction talks, took place in 1982. Several would follow in the next 3 decades. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved and the Cold War ended.
In 1953, President Eisenhower delivered his Atoms for Peace speech, calling for the development of peaceful nuclear technology for energy purposes. 4 years later, in 1957, the first large-scale nuclear power plant began operating in the Pittsburgh area. In late March 1979, the 3 Mile Island accident occurred, causing widespread fear over mainstream nuclear technology. This incident was caused by plant operator error, rather than technological failure. Unlike the much more serious Chernobyl incident that would occur 7 years later, the resulting rise in the rate of cancer in the areas surrounding the plant was not statistically significant. Cleanup for the incident started in 1979 and ended 14 years later in 1993 with a cost of $1 billion. This incident caused the anti-nuclear movement to gain plenty of momentum, successfully preventing the construction of dozens of new nuclear power plants. By 1986, there were 100 nuclear reactors operating in the United States. However, as of 2017, no new nuclear power plants have been built in more than 30 years. However, 4 are under construction. There are lingering issues regarding the disposal of nuclear waste and the vulnerability of the continued use of multiple decade-old systems. There are new nuclear technologies that greatly reduce the potential for meltdowns and are much more efficient, producing less nuclear waste. However, the public is very hesitant to support new nuclear projects.
There are currently 9 known countries with nuclear weapons. These include the United States, the United Kingdom, China, Russia, France, Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. Following the SALT and START treaties, the United States and Russia have significantly decreased the number of nuclear weapons in their stockpiles. However, both nations still possess enough weapons to wipe out humanity many times over in the event of a large-scale nuclear war. The United States has signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1970, which was since renewed in 1995 with the goal of preventing more nations from acquiring nuclear weapons. American officials are concerned about the spread of nuclear technology to countries such as Iran and North Korea. New nuclear power technology such as pebble bed reactor can provide for safer and more efficient nuclear energy in the near future.